Ready to play some tennis?
Let's do it.
Are you going to put your phone away?
No, Roto makes it so easy to buy a car. I can do both at once.
It's really that easy?
Yeah, with the Roto app, I can shop thousands of cars from local dealers, buy the one I want right from my phone, and have it delivered to my house for free. I'm going to try it.
Not a good idea, Jim.
Downloading the app now. And I dropped my phone.
Download the Roto app or check out roto.com when you're not playing a sport. The easiest way to buy or sell a car right from your phone.
Hi there, I'm Dr. John White, WebMD's Chief Medical Officer and host of the Spotlight On series from the Health Discovered podcast. In this special episode, we dive into plaque psoriasis, the difficulties, the misconceptions, and the treatment options available. What does it take to get patients to clear skin?
Well, if you have a relatively limited case of psoriasis, for example, scalp psoriasis, and you put the clobetasol solution on your scalp twice a day, in 3 days, you see dramatic improvement in the psoriasis. Now, if you're covered with psoriasis, topical therapy is not reasonable. With an injection once every 2 or 3 months, you have like a 50% chance of being completely clear and probably a 90% chance of being nearly completely clear.
Listen to Health Discovered on the iHeartRadio app or wherever you get your podcasts.
It all started in 1974 when we were the original source for New York creatives. Today, Adorama's got it all. Photography, gaming, music, and more. But one thing hasn't changed. No matter your medium, Adorama helps you create no matter what. Access our vast catalog of gear. Get pro-level support and customer service from the experts. Adorama. Create no matter what. Learn more at Adorama.com.
This is the Jabberjaw Podcast Network.
Welcome to another episode of 100 Words or Less, the podcast. I don't know why I hung on that words, but I'm Ray Harkins, and I'm your host. So thanks for coming along on this fun journey and romp through independent music, and the people who are behind it, are creating it, are involved in it in some capacity. And this week is a huge guest for me. He is one of my favorite drummers of all time, Sammy Siegler. He plays in a band currently called World Be Free, but he's also in some bands that you may or may not have heard of, which I'm joking around because you've heard of all of his bands. From Youth of Today, Gorilla Biscuits, played in Glassjaw, played in Limp Bizkit, burying the lead there, but he played in Limp Bizkit, played in Ecstatic Lullaby, played in Lost Prophets, played in Rival Schools. The dude has done everything within the context of playing drums. And obviously you could not get a more wide variety of bands than the ones I just mentioned. And above it all, Sammy is an incredibly thoughtful and kind guy. After this conversation I had, I was like, you know what? I'm just endeared towards him because not like I expected him to be a dick and be like, oh, okay, this is going to be a rough conversation, because generally speaking, I've heard nothing but positive things about him. But more on him in a few moments. Let's get some observations and musings out of the way, because I know that's exactly why you listen into this podcast. Actually, I'm going to give a shout out to my friend Chris, who I recently saw at the Bane show, the final Bane show here in Southern California. He actually was joking around because we were in a group conversation with one of his friends who wasn't aware of the podcast, which, come on. What are you living under a rock? I'm just kidding, because obviously this podcast isn't insanely popular and everybody knows about it. But anyways, Chris was saying, he's like, oh yeah, just fast forward a few minutes. I'm like, hey, if my friends are saying this, then but he was just joking. So anyways, for those of you that fast forward through this, I totally get it. It's totally fine. As long as you're listening to the interview, that's all I care about. So like I mentioned, I went to the last Bane show out here in Southern California, and that was a pretty, well, first of all, completely unreasonable as far as the time they went on stage. Midnight. Come on, guys. I understand there's a lot of bands that were playing, and everyone was playing cool full sets like Terror and Death by Stereo and a great new band called Axis. But, oh my gosh, I was just exhausted. So anyways, removing that personal complaint of a late show, they were incredible and thoughtful and thought-provoking. And Aaron Bedard, will go down as one of the best frontman from the late 90s to early 2000s, even to this day. Like, it's not like he lost any sort of conviction or spring in his step, because it was just so incredibly, I guess, emotional. That's the best way of putting it, because this is a band who's existed for the better part of 20, 21 years, and has left a real impact on hardcore and punk and independent music in general. Because it's funny, the Bane sweatshirt I just say that, and I'm sure you have an image that pops up in your head. I used to joke around that a show couldn't start until someone showed up in that Bane sweatshirt. And so it's like, if you had a show of 20 people, there's going to be one person in that. And so I always joked around that it's like, oh yes, there's the person in the Bane sweatshirt. The show could start now. So anyways, farewell, Bane. Thank you very much. And I want to get Aaron Bedard on the show at some point. I emailed back and forth with him. It was like 2 years ago. We weren't able to make it happen because I could tell he's kind of reticent to maybe do something as long form like this. And I get it. But anyways, he's a dream guest. I will continue to pursue that. And then I also saw a band recently called Daughter. Holy crap, that band's incredible. That could potentially be my album of the year. But yeah, just really haunting, atmospheric, everything I love about music they created, and in spades. So I love that. And you should be using the Amazon affiliate code. Please click on the show notes to whatever podcast catcher device or your computer that you're listening to. Just click on that link, save it as a bookmark, and do all your shopping via Amazon through that link, and it supports the show. We get kickbacks, 3% of whatever it is you buy, and it doesn't affect your price. It's not like you're paying 3% more. So it's just a kickback that Amazon likes to give. So please do that, because that funnels to the show and keeps everything running smoothly around here as far as equipment and everything else that I need to make sure to keep this thing going. So there we go. There's business here. Here's Sammy. Like I said, legendary drummer. And it was funny, the day that I recorded this with him, I saw him that night play in World Be Free, and just watching him play, I was like, oh man, I just love the way that he plays drums. Just, he continues to hit hard, continues to just be a pro at what he does, and I love it. So anyways, this was actually, I threaded this conversation over a couple different, or 2 days in particular, because Sammy needed to jump off the phone for a first conversation we have. So you might be able to hear the difference in recording, but I think you'll be fine regardless. So here is my lengthy conversation with Sammy, and I will talk to you after the show is over. Here you go. So like when I first started to get into hardcore when I was like, 15, 16 years old, obviously started to buy all of the prerequisite records you're supposed to get from the Youth of Today's and Side by Side and Gorilla Biscuits and all that sort of stuff. And then it just made me laugh because no matter what record I picked up, you were on it. And I was just like, granted, this was my kid logic where I was just like, are there any other drummers that can play like in New York at all? It just seems so bizarre to me that everyone kept asking you to play at all their records. Was it, I'm sure it's difficult for you to kind of like reflect on that time from this perspective, but was it always weird that people were always like, hey, Sammy will play in this record? Or was it just kind of like, oh, I'm friends with them, so I'll just jump in on this?
It's funny. As you said that, I was just thinking of like, I guess like sort of Keith Morris being in Black Flag and being in the Circle Jerks. And kind of when I got those records of just making that connection, like, wait a minute, this guy sang for this band too? Like, how did that happen? Or,
right.
Some of the DC stuff too. But for me, it just kind of, it happened real natural. I was super young, I think at the time too, like 12, 13, 14. And it was like, my friend, one of my best friends knew Walter Schreifel's like little brother, Dylan, and like looped me in with him, and they needed a drummer for Gorilla Biscuits. So that happened. But then, another friend of mine introduced me to Jules from Side by Side, and they needed a drummer. And then Side by Side started opening for Youth of Today on road trips, and we all became friends. And then, Mike Judge left Youth of Today, and they needed a drummer. So I was just there. It just happened. I kind of like, and even past hardcore, whenever I was like, all right, that's it with drums. Like it's time to grow up and, kind of whatever, get a real job or something. things would just sort of kind of fall in my lap, or just opportunities would sort of present themselves of like, hey, you know what, actually, like, Civ is now signed to a major label, and you can actually make, whatever, some more, some more money, a living, yeah, or rival schools, or, some session stuff. So it just sort of, kind of progressed really natural. I mean, I loved it. I loved playing, and I worked hard at it and rehearsed a lot and stuff. But it was just, we were all friends that happened to play music, and we're super into hardcore, that it was just like, let's do this project. Let's do this project. Let's do something like this. Let's do something heavy. Let's do something super straight edge. Let's do something, whatever it was. So.
Yeah. I do like that vibe too, because it is, you do see that when you start to develop those friends early within the context of a scene, you do just want to be creative with them. You're just like, dude, I want to just play with you. Like, let's figure this out. And it just, obviously it just happened to be that you were at the apex of the launching of a scene. So then, people retroactively would look back and be like, how is it that you played on so many seminal records? And you're just like, well, it happened.
I think as a drummer too, and maybe bass players are like that, where you just kind of are needed more, and you can kind of, you're not like the front man, you're not necessarily the face of the band. So it's not like you get really tied to one band. Like, you're Ray of Today from Youth Today. That's who you are. Right. And maybe we'll let you be Shelter or Better Than 1,000, but really you're Ray of Today. You know what I mean? Like, as a drummer, you're kind of just able to just sort of jump around and do these projects. And even to this day, like, I still think of like, shit, like, I really want to do a project with this guy, or like, I'm playing shows. This band Nightmare View that I was in is playing some kind of shows. It's a 10-year anniversary of this record. And it's like, shit, man, Brandon's a great songwriter. He's a great dude. I want to do a new project with Brandon. Or, Daryl from Glassjaw, like, I played with him, and like, shit, it would be fun to just do an EP with Daryl, or, just ideas, or creative ideas. And that's kind of how World Be Free came about, was like, you know what, let's just do a couple songs. Let's do this hardcore project. And, kind of became an album.
Right. No, it's cool, because you, like I said, you just kind of, especially you, because you strike me, even though, we don't know each other, I just observe you as being a very laid back person. But you do seem proactive, because there's obviously people who, I've definitely played with a lot of drummers who are just like, where do I show up? And I'm good. Like, whatever. Like, I'm not going to contribute anything beyond like, just showing up, playing the drums, and kind of like that. But you've always struck me as a person where you were rolling up the sleeves and, like you said, coming up with these ideas to start projects or whatever. Was that always the case, or did you kind of?
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, I recently saw a photograph of a side-by-side show. I think it might have been like the Pyramid or something, with a big banner, and I painted the banner in my house. I mean, I was probably 14 years old, right. And maybe that's just what 14-year-old kids do. It's just like, you make the T-shirt for your band, or like the hat, or the thing, or so. I did that, and then I guess I was kind of even handling some of the business. I ended up booking, which is really crazy looking back, because I booked a tour for Shelter, Inside Out, and Quicksand, like a 3-week tour to Minneapolis and back. I got a bunch of phone numbers from, I think, Doug Karen, who's a booking agent, and just called up these venues and booked this tour. And like, 20 of us went out and did it. And that's just kind of nuts. But I guess I was always wired like that, to just sort of, like, I'm passionate about this. I can make this happen logistically, as well as, playing on it.
Yeah, that's that. As funny as that sounds, it's not a trait that is common within, because, you'll notice this. There's always like one or two people in any particular band that are more, business and logistics driven. And so it's like, and then the rest of the people, just kind of show up. Not like there's anything bad about it.
No, for sure. And that's the balance. And that's, definitely every band I've been in, you point out those people. And, as I get older, it's nice to have other people that do it too. I get like,
sure.
And Judge now, like Charlie, is just on it. He's great. He was a great addition to the band, and he's always been he and I were in Civ together, and he's one of these dudes that is just like, I know whatever hotel's going to be booked, or, just certain logistics. So it's nice to have that. But yeah, I don't know. I guess it helps you, obviously, in anything you do. I mean, if you want to do something, then if, coming with a good attitude, a positive attitude, and trying to like make the most of the situation and help the overall cause. It was always that mentality, of that band mentality of like, that's why I never really was a big session guy, because I just didn't like that idea of just showing up, playing anything, and leaving. I like the idea of, let's make something special. Let's make the banner. Let's work together on the T-shirt. Let's make the tour, and let's all win together in whatever project this is.
Right. You want to be all encompassing. You want to feel like you're a part of something as opposed to, like you said, just
Right.
being a service provider.
Right. If it works, we're all psyched. If it fails, then we're all in it together.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And so I reflect on the idea, like you've mentioned more than once already, where it's like, because you were so young, starting to play in these bands, where were you born and raised in New York City, or where did you kind of
I grew up in New York City. I grew up in downtown in Manhattan. Actually, like my great grandfather started a moving and storage business in like 1875 and had like a little warehouse downtown in Manhattan that it's actually where we ended up rehearsing. We took the picture of the back cover, the Disengaged 7-inch was taken there, and we wrote that record there and went on Salone there and bringing it down. A lot of it was there. So
does it still is it still in your family?
No, the whole neighborhood's all changed, and this one photographer bought it, and that was kind of it, like a while ago. But yeah, I grew up downtown, and my parents were really cool. My dad played drums, my grandfather played drums. They were really supportive. My mom, it helped that we were all straight edge, and my mom loved having us all around, and was like, kind of, our house was sort of like the clubhouse, I guess, in a lot of ways. I mean, Billy from Side by Side, was homeless for a little bit and then stayed with us for a few weeks, and Gavin, who was playing in Side by Side at the time, stayed with us for a little bit as well. And just different, Purcell moved in for a while. And so,
everyone was welcomed with open arms, it sounded like.
Yeah. And that, I think, coupled with the fact that I have an older sister who's 3 years older than me, and she introduced me to kind of like my first real band, which was a band called Noise Police, which were these two guys that later went on to be in the Skadanks, Alex and Toby. And we covered Power by Agnostic Front. So that was sort of my first introduction to sort of New York hardcore. That was probably 85, so I was 10, I was 12 years old. And they weren't straight edge. And I was into coming out of punk originally. Like I guess I got into Kiss when I was really young, and then like Blondie and Devo, and then just punk records. And then I was into like punk and kind of thinking I was cool and smoking cigarettes and trying weed. I mean, crazy shit at a young age. As a father now, like it's wild to even look back at it.
Right.
But I did acid by accident. Like a friend of mine gave me this tab of acid in Washington Square Park, and I was like, oh, cool. And he said, it's like pot. And I was like, okay. And then I just tripped my ass up. It scared the shit out of me. So when I met these straight edge dudes, I was so happy. I was like, all right, this fucking rules.
Right. And you're like, hey, guess what? This isn't like pot.
Yeah, exactly. Surprise.
So what did your parents do? Like, did they work in the moving business, or what did they do to kind of?
So my dad kind of had this family business thing, which was moving and storage. So moving people. So I would work, in summers I would work there and help people move up and down stairs and all sorts of shit. He loved playing. I think he would have preferred to have, been a professional musician and play more. But this, you get two kids, and this job was kind of right there for him. So he did it. My mom was a freelance copywriter, so she would, bang out at a typewriter and just write stuff for, catalogs. And, my sister, life was pretty good. I mean, I met people in the hardcore scene who had really fucked up situations, who kind of, were driven to hardcore to get away from whatever fucked up situation. That wasn't really the case for me. My parents were cool. Mm-hmm. My situation was pretty cool. We were like middle class or something. So I just loved the people and the music and the energy and, really all of it. But I guess, ultimately that's what's cool about the hardcore scene, at least it was at the time, was that everyone was sort of welcome. It's not like you had to be fucking living on the streets or you had to be, this or that. I mean, there was some
everyone came to it with their own experiences, and obviously that just made you who you are, and it didn't define you as a person. And plus I like the, because I definitely think that, each proverbial scene kind of has that sort of central house, whether it's like, obviously like you mentioned, your family was so inviting, and like, I had a similar experience where my parents were super supportive of all the bands I played in. And anytime my parents woke up in the morning and they're, like 6 dudes just sleeping on the floor. And it was like, most parents would be like, what are you doing? But, my mom was cool. And obviously it sounds like your house was the focal point of a lot of activity around that. And so I presume that because of, your parents knew the lay of the land and knew a lot of the people that you were involved with. That's why they were like, oh, that's okay. You can, go on tour when you're 13 and 14.
Yeah, totally. Basically in 88 when Youth Today did the Went on Salone tour, that was my first real like tour. I mean, it was almost, 2 months. And, the only reason why I was allowed to go was because, she'd already known these guys for a couple of years already, and trusted us all and stuff. So,
right.
And I think growing up in the city, you grow up younger, you do things. I mean, shit, I'd already done acid 2 years prior to that.
Right. Yeah. You're like, yo, I'm an adult. Okay.
Right.
So did you, just because you got introduced so young, like, did you, care about school, or like, where was that in your head as far as, were you just basically biding time until you could get out and obviously focus on drums more?
I liked it more from the social aspect of just going to hang out with my friends and stuff. I unfortunately wasn't like the most academic kind of kid. And then later in high school, when I was really into when I was fully like into hardcore and playing in bands, I guess I was definitely not as focused. It was kind of like, all right, let me do this and then get out of here and go, play my shows on the weekend and go to rehearsals and do this and that. It was funny. I went to like a private school that went out of business, school called McBurney. I think actually Richie Birkenhead went there and a bunch of other people, but, I went on that tour in '88, and I came back after touring the summer, and my mom was like, "Oh, your school went out of business because they were trying to move buildings or something." I was like, "Fuck, what do I do?"
Right.
So my friend went to the school called PCS. It was like professional children's schools. A lot of actors, like the Cosby Kids, went there, and Macaulay Culkin. A lot of people who were supposed professionals that would be able to leave school and not get kicked out or have to repeat a year, and they just get tutors or whatever. And there was also kids that just went there for normal school, but I ended up just going there like, fuck, okay, let's go to this place. It looks cool. And we got in. And sure enough, that winter, Youth Today toured Europe for 2 months during the school year. So I was actually able to kind of go on consignment and do my schoolwork from the road, which was a trip because I was in Rome, studying about the Roman Empire, and I was in Germany studying about the Nazis and checking shit out. And I still managed to fail like math and Spanish, but
sure.
Ultimately it all kind of worked out. But that was a really weird, unique scene. You know what I mean? That doesn't happen very often. And, but I had friends at school and I think the social aspect was fun, but I was definitely into the youth crew or whatever, like that was my scene. Those were my dudes and we would hang out all the time. And,
right. Did you, just because obviously the notion of, doing these bands from sort of a, like you said, a career full-time standpoint, like, that no one had that in their heads at that point, just because it, you were children and you didn't think that way. When did all that stuff start to kind of, I guess where it felt real for you, where it was like, oh, wow.
I think that I went to like Gorilla Biscuits broke up. I was playing Gorilla Biscuits again like 91 and broke up. I started playing in this reggae band called 32 Tribes, which was a really cool chapter in retrospect. I think I did it for like 2 years, and it was just these kids that went to the United Nations school. So we, our bass player was like from Jamaica and our singer was from Ghana, and the, guitar player was from Sierra Leone or actually vice versa. But so it was a really cool band. We played like a whole different sort of scene. We were playing colleges and like nightclubs and stuff. But after that, I was like, all right, or maybe around that time, I was like, I got to go to college. All my friends are going to college. So I went to the New School, and they have a jazz program there. So I was studying jazz and kind of, liberal arts and stuff, and kind of supposedly sort of growing up and doing what all my friends were doing as far as school. But meanwhile, we started this band Civ, and I was also playing with Ian Love in a band called Loaded. And I think this must have been around the time when like Green Day was just starting to blow up and the Offspring was starting to blow up and like punk was starting to blow up. So these major labels were starting to sign these bands. And I remember like Loaded did a demo and we had this lawyer that we knew who was just like, hey, people are really interested. You guys might get yourselves a record deal or whatever. Or the grunge. That was more in the vein of grunge, actually. And I think that Nirvana and all that stuff was also starting to kind of blow up. And, but then at the same time, Civ started to kind of get some traction with the EP that we did with Etsy Brute and Can't Win More. And then we got a record deal. And I was, I love the New School was a cool experience, but ultimately after a year and a half, I didn't want to become a music teacher. I wasn't into like ethnomusicology. I wanted to fucking rock out with my friends on the road. And so I basically, bailed on that and just Civ got a record deal with Atlantic and just kind of doubled down on that. What's up, man? So yeah, we just doubled down on that. And that's, I guess, when it kind of felt real because that was different. That was, we had a tour bus, we had tour support. We had shit that like, was unheard of back in, the Youth Today days and stuff when we were sleeping on people's floors.
Right.
we had budgets for hotels. We had a crew, we had like a tech and all this sort of stuff. And so I think that was really the point where things kind of changed, which was cool because honestly, if it stayed the same, I would have probably gotten bored. I mean, there's only so many, I love hardcore and I love it all, but I just like it when things evolve or devolve or just change. So it's not the same over and over.
Right. Well, I think that most people, when they look at your career from, playing on so many varied records, I think that's pretty evident because, you don't stick to the script, It's not like you the past 20 years you've just been like, well, only interested in hardcore. Like that's all.
And it was a natural progression. I mean, to be, Civ was a bit of a departure from straight up hardcore. We had some sort of poppy tunes, but after 4 or 5 years of that, when Civ finally broke up, I was fortunate to do Rival Schools, and that was sort of a different experience in itself. And we had more success in the UK. We had like a song on the charts in the UK. We're doing all this like different sort of press, and we're just playing different, just different areas. That UK success was, it was just to kind of put you into a different sort of place, I guess. And then also the world kind of just starts to open up. Now there's a scene in Japan and now there's a scene in Australia. And so now you're traveling around the world. I mean, Civ played in Hawaii, and it was just cool the way you just got to witness from kind of back in, planting a little seed in Europe in 1989 with Youth of Today to, 2001 with, Rival Schools. Like, it's just cool to see like how, things sort of grew, progressed.
Right. The different experiences can, although they're, like you said, different, they all feel similar because you're obviously still creating music, but then, it's just on a larger scale where it's like, oh, wow. Yeah.
In retrospect too, I mean, I've done stuff without Walter, but I mean, really Walter is like this really cool constant in a lot of that stuff. I mean, definitely in Civ and definitely in Rival Schools. And then he and I were in Youth together and played in Gorilla Biscuits together and stuff. So, I mean, like, it's nice to have, some kind of familiar faces throughout these changing times.
Right. I know you've been posed this question before, but the idea of drums obviously was in your family. But did you ever tinker around with anything else? Like, were you like, oh, that'd be cool to be, play guitar, be a singer?
Yeah, I mean, I wish I did. I mean, it gets frustrating at a point. You have ideas in your head, and you got to like hum it out to someone to kind of like transcribe and figure out. Right. So there was a time where I was like, fuck, I gotta learn how to play guitar. This is getting ridiculous. I mean, I took some piano lessons. I didn't really spend enough time on it, mm-hmm. but a little bit of guitar, but not as much as I probably should have. I mean, at some point I really got into I started to get into Pro Tools and Reason and programming beats, and that was really cool to finally just have some freedom to like, oh wow, you can like program a bass line or program, an organ line or just a melody or some kind of idea. But looking back, like all you kids out there, like at a young age, like learn, if you're into music, definitely learn more than just your one instrument, especially drums. I mean, it's cool, I think, to be able to learn a sort of more melodic instrument like guitar or bass or piano or something like that. It helps you.
Right. So something that has notes. I mean, technically drums have notes too, but still.
Yeah. I mean, my dad always taught me, he said, look, drums, you got to play the song on the drums. Like, he's like a good drummer. You could walk into a jazz club in the middle of a drum solo and know what song he's playing. That's a good drummer. So if you're not just banging on the drums, you're approaching it in a musical way, which, was cool. And I think maybe, definitely his influence gave me sort of a unique approach to hardcore, even a more musical approach. And I was exposed to jazz, and I played in this reggae band, and, I just love, hip hop and all different kinds of music. So
yeah, you're able to take all those influences and obviously play it out on, you're not just this linear drummer who's like, yeah, I'll hit really hard for hours.
Right. And those guys are great and kudos to them, but that wasn't my thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so something I find interesting too, because you have worked with so many different people, like you said, across musical genres, what are some of the things that you've obviously learned by basically having to integrate yourself in really bizarre situations, from like obviously like playing session stuff for Limp Bizkit, and then like you said, Nightmare of You, and like all of these different personalities, and this is going to lead into another question I'll ask later, just in regards to you being kind of a easygoing person.
Mm-hmm.
Is that kind of what you focused on, where it's just like, all right, no matter what room I'm in, I got to be, I got to bring my A game, but I have to be a person who's kind of adapting to the energy and the personalities that are within the bands? Or how do you approach that?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's more of a probably personality thing of just being, I'm a pretty open, friendly, can make small talk kind of guy, and I think being able to adapt to different situations. And I know I like the, just the bring it on aspect of life, like, fuck it. Okay, cool. You know what? Let's try it. Bring it on. See if it works. I mean, if it's something I really don't want to do, I'm not going to do it. But, that Limp Bizkit thing being the weirdest one. I mean, I grew up like hating Limp Bizkit, but I knew the producer. He asked me if I wanted to do it. And I was in LA and I was like, sure, why not? Let's jam. Let's see what happens. It was so bizarre. It was so off the wall that I was like, fuck it, let's do it. And so it ended up being a really cool experience, but that definitely equipped me for that,
Yeah, well, because I think there's something important that you said in there where the notion of closing yourself off and like saying no to things, like, I've never understood people who, their default mode is no. It's like the idea.
Yeah, you got to be in it to win it. You don't know till you try it. Like,
right.
You got to put your hook in the water to get a fish, all that shit. Like, let's just do it. Sure. I mean, I ran into a friend of mine. He was dating Patti Smith. I went to school with this kid and he was dating Patti Smith and lived by me on McDougal Street. And he said, hey man, Patty's got a weird like last minute show coming up. Do you want to play drums? I was like, sure, let's do it. So I ended up playing drums for Patti Smith for this like benefit show. I think me and the bass player for 32 Tribes played on this PM Dawn track once, which I'm kind of like vaguely remember, but just there's, just many different chapters. And that's how all the, the hardcore stuff too. You want to do a project? Let's do something called Project X. Cool. Right. Let's do something like, just all that stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Would you, so, kind of going into what we were just talking about, but, the easygoing nature of you as a person, like, so you do strike me as a guy who can kind of inject yourself into most situations, and not in a bad way, but be kind of a chameleon where you're just like, okay, what's the common thread that I can pull from this group of people that we can kind of get along? Was that always how you were, or was that something that you kind of like learned just because you got involved with so many different people so young?
I think I was always really just kind of personable, some the class clown, I guess, or, just sort of that kind of guy. But as a musician, I guess looking back, like there, the common thread in all these projects and everything I do, for better or for worse, is hardcore. So when I do like Nightmare of You, like, other drummers would approach it differently, but I just have this like kind of sit on top of the beat, lay into it, kind of approach to that. Even if I'm doing stuff with brushes, I just still have this hardcore thing, which again, sometimes I think sucks. I'm like, fuck, man, why do I always just, why can't I hit like some of these other guys that are, non-hardcore dudes? I don't know if this makes sense, but like, so I think the common thread is hardcore, so whether it's, I've Glassjaw and Gorilla and Limp Bizkit but any project that I have, it's musically, that's the backbone of it. But as far as what equipped me to kind of approach these situations, I think I've always been like that kind of person, I've just, and I maybe it's just growing up in New York too.
Yeah, you have to get used to so many different people and personalities and cultural backgrounds and all that sort of stuff in order to, survive, obviously, in the city.
Yeah, it's a really unique way. I mean, again, as a father now, like I'm kind of looking at that stuff. I've got a 6-year-old daughter and we live in LA, which is cool, but it kind of feels suburban to me at times. And she's pretty outgoing too, but looking back, like New York, especially in that time in the 70s, like it was fucking very interesting,
right. That's probably putting it kindly.
Yeah.
And so then as you started to, dive more into kind of looking at your world outside of the context of, just playing drums in a band and like, obviously like, what do I need to do to survive and all that sort of stuff? Like, did you have any aspirations from, I guess, a career perspective, or was it just basically like, I'll do this thing until it runs out and then, we'll see what's available?
Shit. I mean, I think it's the same sort of thing that allows me to kind of approach these different bands and walk into a room and learn the songs. Like, kind of has been sort of in the back of my mind, like, I'm just going to figure it out. Like, it's going to work out, this career thing. And I've had thoughts. If anything, I've had too many ideas. Like, I'm going to start a comic book company with my friends, or I'm going to start a record label, which I did. And, it probably stems from that whole original DIY kind of hardcore thing of just like you could do whatever you want. But I guess I just always feel like I'm gonna kind of land on my feet and I can adapt to different situations. But so it never really was a huge concern. I mean, it's on my mind a lot of like, fuck, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? What's my plan? What's my 10-year plan? My 20-year plan? What do we have? All that kind of stuff, especially having a kid. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, for the most part, looking back, like I just sort of was kind of going forward. And, but I mean, really, having a kid changes a lot of it because.
Yeah. You're responsible for someone beyond just yourself. Yeah.
When it was just me, it was, I got this. I figured out worst comes to worst. I'll fucking work at Starbucks and I'll play drums and it'll all work out.
Right. Something I find interesting too, just because of the time that that you grew up within the context of the New York City hardcore scene, there were so many philosophies that were, being incorporated into the scene, whether it was like Krishna consciousness, whether it was straight edge, veganism, vegetarianism, like all these ideas were circling around you. And obviously you incorporated some of them into your life. But what were some of the principles that, I guess attracted you when all of these things were kind of swirling around? Because essentially, you could label yourself like 7 different things at that particular time. And so I don't know what kind of stuck to you with those philosophies that I guess you carry with you.
For me, as far as my philosophies, like, again, I kind of all my best friends when I was a kid, when I was 13, 14, 15, that whole world, and we were playing hardcore, we were all straight edge. So I think I was just kind of influenced by them, that they were sort of older. Some of those guys were a couple years older, almost like my older brothers. So when Ray Kappa was talking about being a vegetarian, it was just like, yeah, sure, let's do it. It took me a while to kind of wean off meat, but I got into it. Straight edge was sort of a no-brainer. I loved, I was a fan of Youth Today before I joined the band. I loved Uniform Choice. I loved a lot of straight edge bands, and that stuff just kind of came easy. As I got older, I remember playing in Shelter and being around those guys and, staying at some Christian temples and staying at, people's houses who were full-blown Hare Krishnas. And, kind of Ray was into talking about it and kind of challenging your philosophies and this and that. And I loved it, but I also sort of felt confident with who I was. And again, I don't know if that's from just growing up in the city and just being exposed to, like, I knew some dudes that were into Rastafari. I knew some dudes that were into, my dad's Jewish, my mom's Lutheran. Like, I was never very religious, but I was always exposed to a lot of different things that I just kind of felt confident. And my take is that it's a personal sort of thing. And it's great to learn about things, and it's great to experience things, but at the end of the day, I don't necessarily need to shave my head, get a Sika, wear some beads, and jump around. If you want to do it, that's great. Kudos to you. But like for me personally, that wasn't really that wasn't my thing. So I just kind of, at that point when those guys were all getting into Hare Krishna and stuff, I think I had just been, I don't know, maybe experienced enough things where I just sort of felt, you're always going to evolve. Hopefully I will until the day I die, and who the fuck knows, maybe I'll become a Hare Krishna or something at some point. But at that time, my philosophies were just sort of this, eclectic kind of things that I've picked up throughout the years of living my life.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Right. You didn't need to necessarily attach yourself to these certain things just because you ultimately probably didn't believe in them strongly enough to be like, okay, I am this person. It's like, obviously, like you said, the things that you were incorporating into your life earlier were...
If they had better food, maybe. I didn't like the food.
Yeah, sure. So, hey, it's a simple thing, man.
This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. I myself am a huge advocate for therapy, and I think that most people would benefit from it. Because, life just really gets in the way sometime. Whether it's a relationship issue, a family issue, a work issue, you feel overwhelmed. You don't know where to turn to. You're like, I can't bug my family and friends about this. Like, maybe I'll be able to, just push through it on my own. You do not need to be alone in this journey. And that is why BetterHelp is such a cool option. They are convenient because it's flexible, affordable, and entirely online. And all you do is fill out a brief questionnaire and you get matched with a licensed therapist. And you can switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. I love what they do, and I would really, really encourage you trying therapy for the first time. If you want to live a more empowered life, therapy can absolutely help get you there. Visit betterhelp.com/Ray to get 10% off your first month. That is betterhelp.com/Ray. Try therapy, and trust me, it will make your life better.
How are you spending your weekend? With friends and family or at the car dealership? Why lease a new car the old way? With Roto, lease your vehicle in 3 easy steps, all from our app. Shop real-time inventory and see the clear cost. That means the best price personalized to you with no haggling. Then complete your lease right from your phone. The best part? Your new car is delivered right to your door. Download the Roto app today. That's RODO. Ready, set, Roto.
It all started in 1974 when we were the original source for New York creatives. Today, Adorama's got it all. Filmmaking, gaming, music, and more. But one thing hasn't changed. No matter your medium, Adorama helps you create no matter what. Tap into the source for tools, tips, and gear. Gamers, join us on Twitch. Connect with esport champs and take your game to the next level. Adorama. Create no matter what. Learn more at adorama.com/gaming.
What's up, everybody? I'm Toby Morrell from the Bad Christian Podcast, and I wanted to let you all know about the brand new Jabberjaw Media Block on Adobe Radio. Tune in every Thursday night from 5 to 8 p.m. to hear brand new episodes from the Modern Vinyl Podcast, as well as new episodes from one of my very favorite shows, Break It Down with Matt Carter. All you have to do is head to adobe.com, that's IDOBI.com, and tune in every Thursday night from 5 to 8 p.m. to hear some of your favorite Jabberjaw Media podcasts on Adobe Radio. The loneliness of loving someone can steal your eyes and spill the hope you hide and your left has been.
Did you ever have any sort of like, did you go to college or anything like that? Or did you ever had any other plans as far as like a career is concerned, for lack of a better term?
I think that, I was just kind of motoring along, playing in hardcore bands, and it just sort of all, kept one band, one to the next band, the next band, the next band. And then there was a certain point where I want to say like in 91, it's almost like you could almost put it on one show. It was Gorilla Biscuits 91 at the Marquee, I think it was, and like there was a stabbing. I think this guy Minus got stabbed. And it was just sort of like the end. Who else played that show? It was definitely Gorilla Biscuits, Marky, and I played. And I just feel like, to me, like almost like that, around the time of that show, like it's just almost like the page turned on that sort of whole scene that I'd been doing for years. And it's 91, and I was however old I was, and I felt like a lot of my friends were in college, kind of on to their next sort of thing, sort of growing up. And while I was playing a lot of bands, they were sort of focusing on their careers. And I, was like, shit, I guess I got to go to college. Probably about a year or two after that, I guess, more like 92, 93. But I was playing this reggae band, 32 Tribes, which I think I mentioned, and doing that. And then I was like, okay, I'm going to go to the new school. It's by my house. They've got a music program, and that's just kind of like the responsible thing to do. I did that for about a year and a half. And while I was doing that, I was still playing. I was starting to play in Civ. We started kind of working on that as a project. It started as a 7-inch. It was just there was no real intentions for it to become like a real band. And I was doing this band, Loaded. It was called Engine, and then we changed the name to Loaded with Ian Love and a few other people. But really, like in college, kind of open to whatever the next chapter was, and. I had some interest in cooking. I didn't really know what else. I'm trying to think of other like career type things that I could have done beside music. Mm-hmm. But I was open to it. And then, after a year and a half of going to music school, which was a really cool experience. It was a jazz program. This guy Chico Hamilton was my teacher, and Reggie Workman, a lot of real badasses, and was taking English and some other liberal arts and stuff. But I just realized like I don't want to be an ethnomusicologist. I don't want to be a music teacher. And I want to still play. And so fortunately Civ had an opportunity. We got this record deal, and that sort of just kind of kept it going. So I feel like every time I stepped out for a minute there and tried to kind of get away from music, a cool opportunity would present itself. So I would just kind of keep going, stay in the course.
Right. Yeah. You'd get pulled back in because, like you said, it's an opportunity, and it's like, well, I can't say no to this, so I'll do it. Yeah. I'm a big fan of just like you follow the signs of life. You know what I mean? Like if life says, hey, listen, join the army. This is really great. I joined the army. Like, I think twice or 3 times before I did it. But,
You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
where is it presenting itself? Like what, and it, throughout my life, it's always been that way. The weather, like I think we were talking about, I ended up doing some session, for a Static Lullaby in LA. And while I'm in LA, my friend Ross calls me up and says, "Hey, do you want to try this Limp Bizkit thing?" I was like, "Sure." That's an interesting, weird scenario that life just presented, to me. That, and I think it's smart to be able to recognize when, fuck, let me try it. And it's kind of even why I'm living in LA now, is because a friend of mine offered me this job, and I was fighting it, and a lot of my really good friends were just like, you know what, try it. You could always move back to New York. If it sucks, you can quit. And just sort of try it. And so it's almost been 4 years, and it's been working out, and so it's.
Yeah, no, I like the way that you lay that out, because like you said, it's just one of those things where sometimes people don't even recognize what an opportunity is, even if it's like not the sexiest thing. It's like if you're given a choice, and then a lot of people tend to choose on the safer side of things, and it's like, well, you got to put yourself out there in some capacities, because it's not like, like you were mentioning, it's not like doing session work is the coolest or sexiest thing in the world, especially, whatever. Someone could look at the work that you did with Limp Bizkit and be like, dude, whatever, man. But you're like, well, no, it's
but
an
like you
opportunity.
meet someone from there that, like just something could come from that, and it could grow. And it's like, if you don't put yourself out there, you're not going to experience that.
Mm-hmm.
I actually just was sort of on a little vacation down in Mexico with some really good friends of mine, and my friend's son is like 13. He was on the fucking couch for weeks straight playing video games. Like his head was buried. I think he was watching recorded YouTube clips of other kids playing video games.
Right.
Like, and I was just like, man, like you fucking just come for a drive with me. Like come run this errand with me. Like just do something, because you got to put yourself out there.
Mm-hmm.
You might meet some chick who ends up being your wife and your kids, and life changed because you went and, bought some fruit and vegetables with me.
Totally.
You know what I mean? Like,
absolutely. The smallest of things can have such a huge impact. But there's a few things I wanted to unravel in there. Focusing on your time in Civ, because like you mentioned, it was just this really, kind of cute project you were doing just because it was fun, and obviously people you'd played with before. But it was so bizarre. I mean, granted, at that time, I think I was maybe 13, 14 years old, and I was really, really consuming like 120 minutes and stuff like that on MTV. And I definitely remember seeing that video and just being like, I didn't really necessarily understand it because I hadn't really been introduced to the hardcore scene proper as of yet. But, I mean, reflecting on that time, was it just like so kind of bizarre for you guys to be thrown into this major label world because of all of the independent bands being gobbled up during that time? Or was it just kind of
I think, it happened naturally. I think like some of the best things, are like happen sort of naturally and feel right when they do happen. It's like it sucks to force something like, hey, I got this new band, like sign me. We wrote hits, sign me. Like it wasn't that at all. It was just very like, hey, let's record this EP. Et Tu Brute is this hardcore song on one side, and Can't Wait More is this other song, which really was not written to like be a radio kind of pop song. It was just like a song that, was just had a cool vibe, and we were inspired, I think, a lot by like the Buzzcocks and the Jam and the Clash and that sort of stuff. And then that, I think we had the idea. We're talking to our friend Marco Siega, who's an old friend. He was in Bad Trip, and he was into making videos. And he was like, "I want to make a video. I got this idea for the song. Let's do it." And like, we kind of scrounged together some money. And Jordan from Revelation kicked in a little bit of money, and we did this video like on the weekend at the studio that was like closed. We were just hustled, like favors, like borrowed people. Made the video, and then really from the video and the song, our friend Mike Gitter, who was a hardcore dude who happened to be at Atlantic Records at Live Atlantic. He was there. He was at the video shoot. Like he got it immediately. He saw the potential along with what was going on, I think, with like the Offspring and Green Day and the explosion of sort of punk or whatever. And it just kind of happened, naturally, where they were like, this is great. We want more songs. Let's do it. Let's make a record. And, next thing we were able to spend like a month just writing. And, Walter and Charlie and I really just got into it, and Civ and Arthur and it just sort of happened, again, very naturally. And then, like, the manager happened to be Quicksand's manager, so who, this guy Scott McGee, who's kind of like he came from sort of a more like rock world. He did like Skid Row, and his brother does manage Kiss, but Scott was our manager, and again, just through Walter's relationship, and And so he had, sort of these connections to larger tours, and I think that, along with just what was going on in music in general. I mean, at that time, I think Sick of It All got signed to East West, some major label, and Into Another was signed to Hollywood, and every band was just signed to a major label, and that was it. And I had made peace with that. I was fine. Like I'm cool with my hardcore cred, and I love the mom and pop indie aspect of things, but it was sort of new, uncharted territory. These people were. And also, like, the people that we were dealing with were kind of hardcore people. Like, Mike Gitter was a hardcore dude. He just happened to be in this position of working for, a major label. And so,
So correct me if I'm wrong, but I heard you say in there that you guys did that video kind of on your own, on spec.
Yes.
Before. That's funny, because for whatever, I mean, I just always was under the impression that the video obviously came after the Atlantic deal, but that wasn't the case.
No, totally. No, it was just like, let's do the idea for Civ was to do a series of EPs, and then the video was just something that I think Walter and Marco started talking about, and it just kind of was like, let's do this video.
That's amazing.
And it wasn't even like, let's do a video to get signed, let's do a video. It was just like, let's do this cool video to accompany the song. Marcus wants to get into doing videos, and then he later went on to be to do a lot of huge videos, and he does a couple TV shows now and stuff. So it's cool.
Yeah. Do you, just because obviously since you've been involved for so long, the highs and lows that you experience in regards to the sort of business of making music, you've always seemed to be just based on your personality, relatively unaffected by the fact that it's like, okay, well, this record wasn't the second coming of Christ or the next Nirvana or whatever, whatever descriptor you want to put on it. Were there moments in your head that you kind of, you went through that were sort of your low points where it's like, oh man, I don't even know if I want to pick up a stick anymore because of, you just get kind of grind down by the business? Or did you always kind of have a healthy attitude?
I mean, the stuff that makes me not want to pick up a stick anymore is more like bullshit between good friends. Like when you're in a band and you are arguing over like t-shirts, or you're arguing over like, just somebody, or you're just, maybe you're burnt out because you've been touring too much, or, someone needs a break and they're just not communicating it properly. But like that stuff sucks. That's when it's like, like this isn't really, like, it's not like we're all getting rich off this, and on top of that, we're arguing with each other. And so that's kind of stuff makes me not want to do it. If a good friend is, if you get in some sort of dispute over some bullshit. But as far as like the record's selling or not selling or whatever, like that, I don't know. I just kind of ride it. I think maybe my way of sort of protecting myself was by doing a lot of different things, because then it's like, it's not like I have everything vested in this one fucking release, and if it doesn't do well, like, I'm screwed. But I mean, obviously I want everything to be, received well. It helps, but I think a good example could be like the second Civ record. And we did it, and it was our second major label release, and we were coming off tour with like No Doubt, and there was a lot of like the pop punk thing was sort of very big, and we wanted to write like kind of, I think again more like a jam in the Buzzcocks, and Walter wasn't really around to help write the way he did on the first record, and we made this record, and it's a cool record. It just was a little bit of a curveball, I think, to a lot of our fans. And on top of that, the label didn't support it. So I got my first experience of what happens when a label just literally does not get behind it. And so they didn't. Fortunately, we were able to get out of our deal. We got our masters back, and we left in a good way. But that was kind of a bummer, because you spend a year, year and a half or whatever, writing and recording, and you wait for it to come out, and it comes out, and then it just kind of doesn't do well. But it was also, that was, the band, although it was only our second album, the band had been around for like 5 years. So maybe it was just time to do something different, because that's a long time.
Yeah. Well, I like your reflection on that idea of, keeping busy regardless of what is happening. Because I think, a lot of people definitely mistake the idea of, being busy with being productive. But like you've obviously shown that you could be productive on many different levels. And like, while one band that you played in may not have had the, massive impact that you might have wanted, it still has an impact, It's like, realistically, you could trace through, all the projects that you've played in, and you can argue that all of them have some impact to somebody, It's not like it went into a vacuum and no one cares about it,
For sure. And I've definitely met kids who have like, I like that second Civ record better than the first one. And it's like, all right, sure, that's cool,
Sure. You're like, I wasn't expecting that, but awesome.
Yeah, for sure.
And then I wanted to focus on rival schools because that was I saw Quicksand, I think, play with Offspring. This was like, it was like Offspring and No Use for a Name. This is when I was like 12 or 13 years old. And so like once the idea that, all these members of all these bands that I loved were coming together in rival schools, I was just like, oh, there's no way I can't like this band. And I think I saw you guys probably, 3 or 4 times when you came out here to California, like with Burning Airlines and, whatever. It was one of those things where I just always felt like you guys were on the tip of breaking into a much wider audience. Obviously you did that over in the UK. But was it one of those things where in the States it was just like, well, I guess people aren't necessarily getting it from a sort of mainstream perspective, so I guess we got to follow where this happens in the UK and that sort of stuff? Or was it weird for you?
It was my first taste of like success in the UK, which I liked. I liked that it's so much more manageable, than the States. Like in the UK, you could do like a tour of 5 shows and you hit, the major markets, Manchester, Birmingham, London, or it's 3, but like, it's like a 5-show tour and you just like nailed it. There's BBC Radio, there's a couple, Kerrang, Metal Hammer, a couple publications, and like, you could really do a lot of damage with a lot less time. And I liked that about it. The US, I just came to, it's just a larger fucking beast. And I kind of experienced that with Civ too, of like, kind of US radio success, buzz clip stuff. And it's just, I wasn't bummed that it didn't sort of happen on a commercial level in the US. And I think with Rival Schools is weird. We made that record and, we wanted it to be great, but, immediately Rolling Stone, I think, had, this is the next best record. This is the best thing since Nirvana on the cover of Rolling Stone. So, the expectations were high. I don't think any of us like sort of really, kind of bought into that. But because we were able to have this sort of success in the UK, it was fun. Like I was, you got to think about bands like, I guess Doggy Dog was a band like that were just huge in the UK, or, for a while, like before Muse really broke, they were huge in France. And it's just kind of cool to be able to dip into this little, like, sort of smaller country and experience just a little, oh shit, this is what it's like to kind of, be a little more popular, I guess. Sure. So it was fun. We were able to do that. We were able to jump in there and we'd be like on a press tour and go on the radio, just kind of experience that sort of stuff. It was and play, bigger festivals and all that.
Right.
But Rival Schools was cool. Like I agree. I mean, I thought it should have, I love the band and I think more people would have dug it, but I think I was happy with the people who did do it. And I think, we got a lot of respect from it and we were able to be super creative outlet. We were able to be really creative, which I liked a lot. I kind of missed that. And in the second record too, and all the stuff that we did, I felt like we were really kind of pushing the envelope, especially in the beginning.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it definitely didn't seem like your traditional story that you hear about people entering, a major label record deal, which obviously, was because of Walter's attachment with Island and everything like that. But you definitely did get a sense that record was your personalities. Like, there's really no two ways about it where you're just like, oh, like, clearly they had co-writers on this or whatever,
Right. I think Walter, and he's my boy, and I think he's so talented. I think he really shines when he surrounds himself with people that could kind of take him to like a little bit of a different place. So Quicksand's a great example. I mean, like Sergio, and Alan have like such like this sound, such more like kind of maybe more like, Sergio like listens to a lot of hip hop, or and so did Alan, I guess, and like Zeppelin, and just like a different sort of thing. And Tom Capone has such like a different sort of maybe more metal influence, or and I just feel like that really created that Quicksand sound, along with Walter's great songwriting. I think Rival Schools was similar. Like I was coming, Ian is a very psychedelic, very lush, very wet, a lot of effects, where Walter is doesn't play that way with his guitar, or didn't at the time. And and Cash has this more like reggae kind of dub thing, and I like, one of the things I like about the way I play is, I think largely through my dad, is that I was exposed to jazz and African music and Brazilian music and funk and all sorts of different things. So it created, it helped create like a cool little sound, I think.
This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. I myself am a huge advocate for therapy, and I think that most people would benefit from it. Because, life just really gets in the way sometime, whether it's a relationship issue, a family issue, a work issue. You feel overwhelmed. You don't know where to turn to. You're like, I can't bug my family and friends about this. Like maybe I'll be able to, just push through it on my own. You do not need to be alone in this journey. And that is why BetterHelp is such a cool option. They are convenient because it's flexible, affordable, and entirely online. And all you do is fill out a brief questionnaire and you get matched with a licensed therapist. And you can switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. I love what they do, and I would really, really encourage you trying therapy for the first time. If you want to live a more empowered life, therapy can absolutely help get you there. Visit betterhelp.com/Ray to get 10% off your first month. That is betterhelp.com/Ray. Try therapy, and trust me, it will make your life better.
How are you spending your weekend? With friends and family or at the car dealership? Why lease a new car the old way? With Roto, lease your vehicle in 3 easy steps, all from our app. Shop real-time inventory and see the clear cost. That means the best price personalized to you with no haggling. Then complete your lease right from your phone. The best part? Your new car is delivered right to your door. Download the Roto app today. That's RODO. Ready, set, Roto.
It all started in 1974 when we were the original source for New York creatives. Today, Adorama's got it all. Photography, gaming, music, and more. But one thing hasn't changed. No matter your medium, Adorama helps you create no matter what. Access our vast catalog of gear. Get pro-level support and customer service from the experts. Adorama. Create no matter what. Learn more at adorama.com.
Right. And I think that's part of the reason why, I personally really like what you do on the drums, just because it is, you can plug you into basically any situation and you will be able to not only handle it, but then bring out that emphasis on whatever the band is attempting to accomplish. Like, I look at the work that you did on the Glassjaw record. And it's one of those things where it's just like, I obviously, because I was paying attention to what you were doing, I knew it was you, but I think you could probably, play it to a less untrained ear and be like, oh, do you think this drummer played on these records? And they would probably maybe have a hard time to put it together, but then be able to, just based on the fact that it's like, oh yeah, like he hits very aggressively. This record is very aggressive, and so you were able to kind of lock into that pocket.
Yeah, that's the cool. That's the coolest compliment I think you pay a musician, or is that they have a sound that you could hear the recording and know who it is. I mean, there's definitely drummers that are better than me, but it's something that I've kind of tried to work at, is like have a sound, So
yeah, that's hard. And that's hard to do with drums.
Yeah, it is totally.
Because you're not playing notes, you have to obviously showcase your style other ways, and I think that's that's definitely
well, like again, my dad plays. My dad, he plays. His thing was like, and granted, jazz is a different thing, but he was like, look, you got to approach it like a musical instrument. Like you should be able to walk into a club and hear a drum solo and know what song they're playing, because the drummer should be playing the song, not just bang 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 bang. So, I try to approach hardcore or rock or heavy music or whatever with that sort of approach of just playing musical. If the fill is like a musical thing, or, make the fill, if the song starts with a fill or there's a break with the fill, like make it part of the song,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The I want to hit on a few more things before I let you go. Was the idea, like you were mentioning, obviously, you after rival schools and once that started to kind of die out, and like obviously like you mentioned, you did a lot of session work where you played with Static Lullaby. Did you play on was it that Fossil Latido record for Static Lullaby? Or
yeah.
Okay. Yeah. It's funny because I think I'm probably one of 10 people that remember that record. But for whatever reason, like I really enjoyed that record, whereas a lot of other people, that record kind of killed that band's career from a sort of, mainstream perspective. But I love that record. It's
I
weird
thought it was really cool. I just jumped in. It was one of those moments where like, I think like, again, I think that there's definitely drummers that are better than me, and there's ways that I can improve 1,000%. But one thing I'm good at is like, learning quick, and like retaining information, I think. And just, so that was one of those scenarios of just like meet these guys, jump in, join it, and like get down like, 15 or 16 songs and record. But I really liked it. It was a little mathy and like a little intense. I don't know like where they were at, like if that was the record was like the Kiss of Death as far as like their sellout record or whatever the fuck it was, but
right.
But there was some cool shit on it. I liked it. I liked the singer. Yes, I liked there was like 3 singers in the band, but I liked this one dude in particular that had a good voice, like really cool voice. They were all good.
Yeah, for sure. But what was kind of the and not even so much from like a negative perspective, but like what was kind of the screwball that got thrown at you in regards to the session work that you were doing? Was it like the Limp Bizkit session, or was it something else that was kind of like, why would someone even think of me to do this thing?
The screwball, like
just out of left field, that you would have never have expected you playing on a certain record or working with a certain person. So yeah, something that's
yeah.
Kind
I mean,
of
I think part of it kind of maybe goes back to your career question too, of like, all right, well, I'm getting older. Like, shit, maybe I need to be like a professional drummer or like a professional session dude. So, and I didn't know what that meant or how to do that necessarily. A lot of it was just sort of word of mouth, and so again, like when. I think that I kind of back to what I was saying earlier about how things just sort of happen naturally. So Static Lullaby, my friend Rodney was the band's manager, and Rodney was the first manager of Glassjaw. And so that just was like a conversation that happened. And I think I might have met those guys in New York, and it just sort of happened naturally. And then that kind of, while I was out in California, the Ross Robinson, the Limp Bizkit thing just sort of happened because he was there, and then you needed a drummer. So it was, with all those things, it just follow the signs of life and put myself out there. And if it's a shitty, if anyone's a dick or the music sucks, then I wouldn't do it. But yeah, I don't know if does that answer your question?
Well, basically, in your own head, which job that you've kind of like gotten, like I said, from a sort of studio perspective, that was the most just bizarre. You were just like, I would never have expected this to come through.
Yeah, I mean, definitely Limp Bizkit. That's fucking. Sure. I hated Limp Bizkit. Like I used to talk shit about. You know what I mean? Like
right.
They were like the ultimate like do not like this band. I would have never ever have predicted that in 1,000 years. So that was a weird one. And then what was the other band? I can never Lost Prophets.
Oh, like I didn't know you did work with them.
Yeah, like my friend was their manager, this guy HM, and he's like, hey, the drummers, like these guys have to do this radio show, and the drummer can't do it. Can you just like fly into Chicago that morning, rehearse, and play the show that night? So I was like, sure. And so I just spent like 2 weeks just kind of listening to the music in my headphones and air drumming and played a little bit along to it on my own, and then just kind of did that and rolled up and met the guys, and we had like a quick rehearsal and played that night. That was pretty bizarre, just like.
Right.
Unexpected, weird, totally.
Right.
Essentially, cool. I don't know.
Yeah.
Fun.
Essentially, you're being airlifted in to handle this, and that's crazy.
And again, too, like I was getting paid, so that was also what I did. I didn't want to work at a clothing store. I didn't want to work at a coffee shop. You know what I mean? Like that was also part of getting older and needing to make some money. But I also enjoyed it too.
That's awesome. I mean, I just like that idea because it's like, who knows what your playing and your personal influence, like all the things that you would bring to the table and potentially introduce to other people who may have no context for independent music in general, may reflect on you and be like, yeah, Sammy was cool. Like what's more about him? And then they can find out about this whole world, and all of a sudden you've introduced people to a whole different side of life that they might not have ever paid attention to.
Yeah, I just think, hardcore, I fucking love the hell out of it. You know what I mean? Like I grew up, fortunately, just got my friend turned me on to punk when I was really young, and fortunately I was able to meet the, Purcell and these guys in other bands and get turned on to hardcore, and it's so cool. But it also, and I guess you could say this about any scene, but there's just a lot of people in it that just kind of have blinders on, that are just like, all I listen to is hardcore, and that is it, and hardcore. And it's like, it's just so, you got to be open. There's so much cool shit out there,
right.
Especially if you're a musician. Like,
totally.
Don't limit yourself to just playing, book up, or whatever, like,
right. Yeah.
box chord progression thing. So totally. I just, I'm fortunate that that's kind of how I like to do things, is just keep it all open. And I love doing, and that's what's cool about doing World Be Free now, is that at the same time, like, I love doing a fucking pure hardcore record. And that was in 2016. You know what I mean? And we just played last night. I played like in LA, and we're playing a skate shop tonight. So
right.
I just like doing it all, and definitely going back to my roots, whenever I can.
Yeah. Well, I think it's fun too, because you can, you obviously can collect all these experiences. You can have this wide breadth of like, oh yeah, I've played a show in front of 10,000 people and I've played a show in front of 20 people, and like they both have their positive things and they both have their negative things. And if you don't experience one, you may not have the appreciation for the other. You know?
Yeah.
And so you mentioned kind of focusing in on your personal life, where you mentioned you moved to LA and because you're working at an advertising agency, correct?
Yeah, a really old friend of mine from New York works for this company out here, and he's just like, hey, man, like we need like sort of a music dude for when like brands and music kind of want to do stuff together. And you like to want the job. So that's, you know, having a daughter and kind of just also ready for some sort of a change. I mean, I love New York, but I grew up on downtown and was living downtown and, you know, just kind of know it really well. Was open to this change. So moved out about 3.5 years ago with my family and do this job, and it's cool. I mean, you know, it's peaks and valleys and stuff. I'm definitely happy I still get to play. It kind of balances out some of the kind of the more corporate side of the job. But I was just like in a meeting earlier today, though, talking about some event, like, hey, we're doing an event in LA, like an outdoor concert event. And I'm able to pull from my experiences, you know, throughout life of really, you know, being on the first Warped Tour, seeing them figure it out, you know, and then, or bigger festivals or smaller, like festivals that did not work, or disasters where fucking the weather, you know, killed 9 people, or we did it happened in Pokopop or Pinkopop in Brussels with rival schools. And like, you know, I don't know, just like different, it's cool. It's cool to be able to kind of use all my life experiences and, you know, in this job. So
that's cool.
It's fun. I mean, there's definitely sides of it, again, that are just sort of, you know, kind of corporate, not exciting. But what I do like about, I guess, marketing or advertising is that it can be creative. And my mother was a copywriter, so she used to write like copy for, you know, Macy's and clothing things and this and that. And my dad's a musician, so in a weird way, it kind of blends both their occupations.
Right.
Coming up with creative solutions where, you know, and again, there's lots of lame ones out there, but there's some cool shit. Like, American Express does something called Unstaged, which is like when they get like Steve Buscemi directed, who was it, like the Arctic Monkeys or something like that. Mm-hmm. And like, you know, just there's clever ways, I think, of doing it.
Absolutely.
So that's kind of, it's a fun challenge.
Yeah, no, it's cool because I always think people of a creative nature, especially that have been influenced by independent music, can step into that sort of marketing, advertising role so quickly and easily because you've been doing it for years on your own, and like you don't even know that you're learning a particular skill. Like you don't know you're advertising your band by, you know, printing shirts and stickers and stuff like that, but then you realize like, oh, yeah, most people don't have that experience, so they don't even, like, if you just went up to a random person in the street and you're like, hey, could you order a T-shirt? Like, you know, they would probably spend, like, $40 a T-shirt because they would have no idea, like, how to do it.
Right.
Whereas, like, people like you and I can just step right into it and be like, oh, yeah, I know a guy, you can get us, you know, shirts for, like, $5 a piece, and we'll have them by tomorrow. It's like, what? How?
Well, and also, like, you never think of it as far as, I mean, I never thought of it, like, as, you know, like the Dead Kennedys as creating a brand or anything like that. But, you know, all these things are, like, we're creative, you know, definitely not with the intent of like creating a brand, but they are like fucking, you know, identifiable brands that have been around for like, you know, years and are super successful. Circle Jerks, like Skanking Dude, or the 7 Second 7, or Youth Today Fist, or any of that stuff. Like, I mean, the Revelation R, you know, all that stuff.
It's almost even separate. Like some people know the iconography, but they don't even know it's actually attached to something else. Besides, it's like, oh yeah, I know that. You know, I know the Misfits Crimson Ghost, but then they're like, oh, that's a band. It's like, oh yeah, that's how big it's gotten.
Yeah, I mean, Ray Cappo's a marketing genius, dude. He started Revelation Records, he started Youth Today, he started Shelter. You know, he had a shoe company for a little bit. You know, he's just done. You know, now he's a huge successful yogi guy. Right. You know, it's pretty cool. And when you think about that, of like, and that, again, that was never his intent. It was like, let me start a brand that'll be around 20, 30, 40 years later.
Totally. Last thing I want to hit on was the fact, like, I know you've mentioned that you have a daughter. How old's your daughter?
6.
6, okay. And how is the, because obviously I myself am a father of a 4-year-old boy, so it's one of those things where it's really interesting coming from the community.
That was not her crying, by the way. That was just like a cute, a different crying baby walking down the street.
Totally. I felt that was very appropriate.
Cute crying baby.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Coming from the community that we do, it's kind of interesting raising children with that sort of context. What sort of stuff have you kind of, I guess, learned either about, either parenting, fatherhood, that sort of stuff, in regards to the fact that, a lot of the stuff that you were doing and getting into was rebellious by nature, and how that all influences you as a father?
Definitely look back at my life and be like, holy shit, that's crazy. I would lose my mind if my daughter ends up doing acid at age 11. Right. But, but it's cool. It's like walking around with a mirror. You're just looking at yourself. They say, things that you say, and they're into things that you're into, and if good habits and bad habits. But musically, like when they're young, you kind of have some sort of control, like of what they can listen to and what they can eat and all that stuff. Like, definitely tried to expose her to. She got really into Blondie. She got really into Kiss, and then and like Joan Jett was interesting. And then she went to a birthday party. She got a little older and got a CD, and it had like Pitbull and Katy Perry and stuff on it. So she kind of ended up getting to this pop world. But she's into some cool music.
The notion of being raised in the community that we have been, just because it is it was very contrarian by nature. So like the idea of your daughter rebelling against you, like is that something that you'll be able to identify with more, or does it scare you, or where does it kind of sit in your head?
Well, it's weird. Like I feel like I stumbled upon the perfect storm of like straight edge hardcore, where straight edge with my friends. This is going back to like 85, 86, when I was really young and met, these guys, and they were all really great people. Some of my, best friends to this day. So at the same time, if I just a couple clicks to the left, there's some really scary people around too. So it's hard to, I'm definitely on board with her thinking outside the box and going against the grain and all that stuff. But, there's fine lines within all that. So I think just being kind of like how my parents were, was just sort of being on it, being observing, I guess. And like, again, like my house when I was like sort of the clubhouse. And so my mom was, always inviting my friends over and making food for everybody and, kind of like the clubhouse. So she was, I think, also just aware of what was going on, and she felt comfortable. And that's why I was allowed to go on all these tours. Definitely encourage my daughter and to do that, because at the same time, if you stay the course, there's so much. There's bad shit that can happen anywhere, but there's so much bad stuff that could happen just by not thinking outside the box. So that was my mom's whole deal too. She's like, you could get in more trouble, going on road trips with the school football team than you could going to play a show in Buffalo with Youth of Today. So. Right.
No, it's pretty awesome. Yeah, I just always find it interesting when the parents, the people who at one point in their lives were just like, I'm not even thinking about children, because obviously you're not supposed to, but then you have one later in life and it's like, oh yeah, like I can see where rebellion would sit in their lives, and how am I going to handle that?
Yep. Yeah. It's really cool. It's a whole journey. It's great.
Right. For sure. And so obviously, like you mentioned, the last thing I went ahead was World Be Free, in the notion that basically everybody you're playing with has been friends for quite some time, and just the sheer joy that you can, honestly, you can kind of hear on the record where it's just like everybody's been wanting to do something like this for quite some time. So is that really just the case, or am I just reading too much into it?
I don't think we're not all like really, old friends. Some of them are newer friends. Like I've known Scott Vogel for a long time, but never really hung out with him. And I've known, Andrew a little bit more, but still, sort of newer friends. I never, Arthur and I go way back. So it is kind of new, but it's something that just sort of like kept just sort of like, it just happened so naturally. It was like a year and a half ago of a phone conversation of like, hey, let's do like, maybe go get together and write a couple songs. We wrote like 3, we wrote 6, we wrote 9, we wrote 10. Over the course of a year, we wrote like 20 songs. And it was just sort of fun, and we would just meet every couple of weeks. And the next thing I was like, fuck, we got a body of work here. Like, let's record it. And, had this hookup with a studio at Hurley and recorded these songs. And it was like, shit, this is good. And then, when Scott did the vocals, it was like, man, this is like way better than expected. And it just happened very naturally. And, the one thing in all of our minds, definitely in my mind, was like, I would love to make a really fucking good hardcore record, kind of like when I was young and I stumbled upon, Screaming for Change or Out of Step by Minor Threat, or, any of those records. It'd be so cool to make a record, and not to say that we did it, but just that was the intent, was like to make a fucking awesome hardcore record. And it's been fun. It's fun that it's fun that I don't, I'm just learning with these guys, so I don't know them that well, some of them. I mean, it's nice to have Arthur there, so it's just cool. It's a new band. It kind of just happened. It could have definitely have just been an EP many times, but it just like now we played last night and we've got like 2 sweatshirts, a bunch of T-shirts and a CD and cassette and like run like this little mini tour right now, and it somehow became a real band. So it's cool. The feedback's been really good.
Sure.
I mean, one negative feedback I saw was like, "Oh, it's totally formulaic." And it's like, yeah, Dick, like, that's the point. It's fucking totally formulaic because that was the goal to make. We're not trying to make like EP into another or something innovative and out the box. Like, we're trying to make an hardcore record.
Right. And the fact you also get to put out another record on Revelation some 15, 20 years later.
So cool. I mean, Jordan came to the show the other night, and I was just like, dude, thank you so much. This is so much fun being able to, like, yes, exactly. Right. And it feels fresh. It doesn't feel like a bunch of old dudes getting together, like, which is, kind of my bar with all this stuff, with doing Judge or doing any of these bands. It's like, can I fucking play these songs? Am I in good shape? Are we all sounding good? Are we all in good spirits? And it's, so yeah, we're free. It feels fresh and it feels good. We're actually playing in a couple nights. We're playing with Judge, so I'll be doing a little back-to-back drumming sesh.
It's all I do like that. I wasn't planning on discussing the idea of reunions and stuff like that, just because it is a topic that many people have kind of beaten to the ground. But I like that that's your guiding principle of just like, hey, can we execute these songs? Are they going to sound good? Like, are we going to ruin our legacy by getting up there and like you said, being old men doing this stuff? So I like that is also on your mind, because that's otherwise.
Yeah, I like to have my ear to the ground and ask the right people. Yeah, I mean, like I said, I definitely like to have my ear to the ground and try and, think for myself. But it's also nice to ask some people that I trust, like, hey, man, is this working? Like, is this good? Like, were we fucking good last night? Did it look like was it a bunch of old dudes getting back together? Or, how much longer can Judge play? Or, I was talking to the singer for Give last night about that. And he's cool. He's, I really trust his opinion. And so he said we can continue for the next 30 years just to play ballads.
Right.
No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate your time, Sammy. Thank you so much for hanging. And like I said, I'll introduce myself tonight, and I'll thank you in person.
Awesome, man. Yeah, let me know when this is coming out to, and I'll get the word out. And I appreciate
Absolutely.
it. Thank you.
I appreciate it.
Right on, bro.
All right, bye, Sammy.
Later, man.
Sammy Siegler was on a podcast that I brought together, and holy crap! Sorry, let me just revel in that moment. I just it's so weird because it's like, here's me. 16-year-old me thinking in my head like, oh wow, man, punk and hardcore is so cool, watching these people play music and doing all this stuff, and now I get to like speak with them on the same level, and it's awesome. And I appreciate you for wanting to listen to that awesome and learning so much about these people's lives and just really taking a deep dive into what makes these people tick. Anyways, enough waxing nostalgic about how excited I am to speak to these people. But anyways, thank you very much to Sammy, and thank you very much to a previous guest on the show, Stephanie Marlowe, the publicist. She decided to help put this together, so I appreciate that, Stephanie. And thank you very much for you, the listener. Yeah, I'm talking to you, who's riding their bike or driving a car, or actually I just got an email from a person who said they roll pasta for 10 hours a day, and this is what they do to pass the time. So big ups to you. Thank you very much. Anyways, next week, the guest will be, do I want to tell you? Yeah, you know what I'm going to tell you. So it's actually just going to be one of those Fredversations, like I've coined. It's with Buddy Nielsen, the vocalist from Census Fail, who I've had on the show a couple times now. And him and I are going to dive deep on a certain subject. We were talking on the phone about some things, and I was like, dude, I want to record this because this is some really, really compelling, thought-provoking stuff. And yeah, so we're going to go to a lot of different places, and I'm excited about that. So next week is Buddy. And please, until next week, be safe, everybody.
You've been listening to the Jabberjaw Podcast Network, jabberjawmedia.com. Shh.
Welcome to Biggie Burger.
I'll take a cheeseburger.
2-door or 4-door?
What?
Sorry, I'm shopping for a new car on the Roto app. Did you know that Roto finds discounts and rebates specific to each customer?
That's kind of cool.
Right. So you get the car you want at the price you want. It's like getting your burger just how you like it.
Get every rebate and discount available. Then save big on your next car with Roto. Download the Roto app or check out Roto.com. Roto, the easiest way to buy or sell a car right from your phone.
We creatives are the achievers, the doers, the believe when no one else does dreamers. We create no matter what. From cameras to mics, lenses, and lights, Adorama has what you need to turn your dreams into a reality. So to you designers, photographers, filmmakers, musicians, we say keep going. It's time to gear up because the world needs your creativity more than ever. And Adorama is your creative partner to help you create no matter what. Go to Adorama.com and equip your creativity. That's Adorama.com.
Wear your story wherever you go. We're Golden, a woman-owned jewelry studio in La Conner, Washington. We create personalized pieces that truly represent you. Crafted with precious metals, freshwater pearls, and ethically sourced gemstones that'll last a lifetime. Our made-to-order process keeps costs low and handmade charm high, and means no one will have a piece quite like yours. Find a treasure you'll adore forever. GLDN.com. Jewelry that means more.